Next In.
Welcome to Next In. Welcome everyone who's watching. I'm Taylor Duncan. You guys know that. I'm here every single time. We have Shane Chown, my co-host. Two of us, we run Next Level Gaming Technology Recruiting Agency. But what we like to do, we like to talk to people who are crushing it out in the actual gaming and technology space to give their knowledge to the masses as to how they got there, what they see in the future, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we are really thrilled to have John Day, former Director of Development at Darewise. And I say former because he is no longer there. So John, we'll start with kind of tell us what you're up to now.
A couple of different things. One, I took a little bit of a breather for one. I'm doing some independent executive production, game direction consulting on a couple of different projects with a couple of different companies. And I also have a team that I've put together, and we're spinning up our own game actually. So we've got a new fledgling kind of indie studio that, we'll see. It's games is pretty risky business, so I guess we'll see what happens. But it's a bunch of old.
I have never heard of a game not making millions. I've never once in my life. So.
So anyway, so I got about a half a dozen crusty old developers like me that have an idea. We want to see if we can make it work. So it's a mix of all that, and spending some time with my kids.
So can we go down that path at all?
Sure.
How much of that do you want to tell us about this new IP that you got going on here?
I'll tell you whatever you want to know.
Yeah, now I'm super intrigued.
Yeah, sure. So the principle that the whole everything is based around is we really want to create games that are about revisiting play, like childhood play experiences, right? That are relatable by a lot of people. The first of these is really what it was like as a kid to play with water, is really what the game is about. And kind of wherever you are, it doesn't even really matter where you are on the globe. Most people I've ever talked to about this can remember being in like a sandbox or on a beach or somewhere where you could kind of modify the space, right? You could tinker with the terrain, or you could bring in objects, and then you could control the way water worked, right? You could make it flow somewhere, you could dam it up, and you could kind of make a tiny lake, and then you could break that dam and you could let it loose. And whether that meant that you were drowning a bunch of army men or that you were floating objects in it and seeing what happened, like there was something fundamental as a kid about just being able to play with water.
Create your own like little river, or your own little dam, or like your own village, your own moat.
Totally. So, but we want to pair these, and we have like a product slate of about 5 different games that we want to do that are all kind of based around this idea of take a simple idea from childhood play, sort of expand on it, because video games give you the power to do that in ways more magnificent than your backyard sandbox, and pair that with a cast of lovable characters, right? That you can attach to, and that we can also build into IP that potentially has some value that we could do some other things with. And so we have I've recruited a couple of my buddies from my days at Disney, who I would call some of the best character art people, period. And we talked through this, and we thought, if we're going to have a game that's about kind of building things in a world and playing with water, it really just made a lot of sense to have that character be a beaver. And so I've got we're still kind of an early concept on the character itself, but we're building this beaver character, which is it almost kind of looks like a toddler in a beaver suit. I can show you some artwork. Give me a second.
Yeah, I'd love it. Are we going to get down the path of when we became a pyromaniac, when we first got to play with fire? Because I remember that distinctly as a kid.
It's very funny that you bring that up.
Fireworks and creating a shooter game with fireworks that you might have.
Just saying, hey, and I would like credits for being part of the, not technical design, but just for coming up with the idea.
It's absolutely one of those things that we've talked about, right? It's one of those other things that like a lot of kids, a lot of grown-ups that were once kids can just kind of relate to as an experience. I don't think that we've kind of coalesced how to turn that into a game yet, like what it is that makes that kind of a game or a toy. I think it's like, well, here's an experience we ought to sort of visit.
I'll put this out there. Have you ever played with mortars?
Yeah, bottle rocket fights.
Like, oh yeah, of course. Like,
So
yeah,
me
okay, sure.
And my family, we used to play dodgeball with mortars. Now, I'm not saying that you should, because clearly you could probably lose an arm. But like technically, me, my siblings, and my dad used to play dodgeball with mortars, and I don't think it was a good idea. There was times where mortars went underneath the car, and that that could have turned into no bueno, right?
It's funny. I've never done anything quite that reckless, and until recently, fireworks in Utah were pretty regulated. Now there's no restrictions at all, right? Because as a kid, what you would do is, so I'm from Salt Lake, and Salt Lake is like a 90-minute drive to Evanston, Wyoming, which is like this border town between Utah and Wyoming. And in Wyoming, it's like, I'm pretty sure you can buy like decommissioned military artillery and stuff there, right? Like, it's like you can do whatever.
Still God's country. You do whatever you want there.
You guys, I'm from Idaho, so like we had the same things, right? Like,
okay.
Another one that was actually fun. Again, if we're talking childhood ideas, we also would get canoes. We'd paddle out. You'd get a canoe, paddle out, and you each had your own set of fireworks, and you would try to shoot each other on that, and you would stand on it.
Yeah, you got to knock them off.
Try to shoot each other 100%. And knock off into the river, or
but you're in the water. So this may be the beaver. Now we put the two together. We got water and fireworks. We marry the two. I'm just saying, we're spitballing. This is whiteboarding.
It's an interesting idea, certainly. And there's no question that you're absolutely right about that being, kind of this relatable childhood thing, right? With fire or fireworks, particularly as an American, fireworks I think are a big thing.
Or like a telescope with ants, and you have a magnifying glass, and you're like
the magnifying.
These are things that I did as a child. I'm like, what? Oh,
I did them too.
With the magnifying glass.
I'm giggling because it's like, oh yeah, like I was there. I remember. What we have on the slate, right? Like this water thing is the first thing, and then up next, like the broader strategy is it's a couple of things. Like, we want to have the childhood play experiences. That's sort of core to everything, and we want to have interesting characters that are lovable and that people that we can leverage as an IP. But there's also kind of a broader vision of, we want to build a big complex game, but big complex games are expensive and they're risky and they're difficult to fund. And so what we want is to have a series of games that are in and of themselves relatively narrow in scope, that are lower risk. But together they basically allow us to flesh out all the systems we would need for this larger experience. And the larger experience is actually on being able to engineer your own ecosystem. So you basically have your own planet, and you can be modifying plants and animals and seeing how they propagate and seeing what lives and what doesn't.
So it'd almost like be creating small DLCs before the game is released. So you can create like mini epic games that can showcase a potential asset that might exist in the game, but it's like a small mini game that then can go into the bigger game and go reverse and backwards. Where
it's like reverse DLC, I guess, if you want to think of it that way. It's like, here's a smaller experience that is cheaper, but is a self-contained experience, but it gives us a chance to prove out and build the tech we need to build the bigger things. Yeah,
if we're building Final Fantasy X, and like you happen to have that mini dodgeball in the water game where you can play that, but then it goes into the bigger experience.
Right. So I think that's pretty good metaphor.
So clearly, Shane and I are probably not going to be on the board of directors with our fireworks idea. We're a little bit too dangerous. But what made you go, hey, I've had success at places everywhere from Disney to Darewise and so on, and go, I'm going to go off on my own. I want to build something myself rather than inside the corporation, if you will.
Well, it's mania, right? It's insanity and addiction for one, right? It's like, I want to do my thing and I want to do it my way, and I don't want to be told, I don't want to have too many layers that I have to get through to do it. I would like to have the committee be as small as possible. So I think there's that. I think me and the rest of the crew, we aspire to own something, I mean, when you work for somebody else, and I've been, to be really clear, I've been treated really well by any of my previous employers and worked on really cool projects and had a great time, but I never owned anything. It was all I mean, at Disney, for example, we did all kinds of cool stuff, but we're working entirely with IP that Disney owns or had partnerships on. So, as a part of Disney Infinity, we got to touch characters from Star Wars and Marvel and all across the Disney catalog. And but it wasn't something that we created, really, not from the ground up anyway. There's plenty of things we created for Infinity that are original and new, but the thing that people, I think, remember the most about those games and games in general are the characters.
Yeah.
And that's something that we wanted a chance to do ourselves.
That's awesome. So what would you say, again, I think this is a fun conversation, because by and large, we're talking to people who are in studio, maybe in very high leadership roles there, and maybe even founders of studios, but you're kind of at that forefront. I'm breaking ground. I'm building my own IP. I've taken the risk to it. What would you say has been the biggest challenge that you faced in this early stage of kind of getting this thing off the ground?
Well, I mean, finding people that want to do the things I want to do, of course, is tricky, right? Like, and fortunately, the strategy has been keep the thing narrow, keep the thing small, because we also want to have the freedom to have a small team and have it still be enough. If you want to make Assassin's Creed 12 or whatever, I mean, Ubisoft throws hundreds of people at those projects, right? I mean, they just have these teams that they can expand really easily because they have these enormous studios. And I just, I don't want to need that, because that kind of scale creates problems I don't want to deal with. It gives you a lot of power, but it also creates a lot of challenges. And so
what would you say are some of those specific challenges, right? Because I mean, there's a lot of people that like aspire to be in the indie studio world. There are people that are in the Ubisoft world where they're like, why would I ever want to go to an indie project versus this massive project? And I'm probably going to make less money, or maybe I'm going to make more. Maybe, like, what's the upside? What's the risk? Like, what's the reward? What's the trade-off? So, I mean, you've been there and done that. So I'm curious as to like what some of those trade-offs specifically have been.
Well, I mean, let me be really clear. I've never actually worked for Ubisoft, so
right.
I can tell you,
Yeah.
I can tell you what I got
worked for
secondhand,
Disney
or what I
and
think
other large
applies.
places.
There are some things I think that apply really generally, right? If you work for a big company, which I think that most people that want to work in the industry, they should do it once. I think it's worth experiencing. I also think it's a good place to be at the beginning of your career, because big companies generally expect you to sort of specialize, which in some ways kind of simplifies the problems you have to solve and the things that you need to focus on, right? If you come in and you're like, okay, I'm a foliage artist, I'm gonna be doing nothing but plants in game worlds for a while, that's pretty specific. But you're going to work with other people that know how to do that. They're probably better at it than you, so you can learn a lot of things. You're going to be able to really focus on kind of this one thing that you can really master. And I think there's a lot of satisfaction that most people get out of having a skill that's pretty specific and seeing yourself progress in that skill, right? I think that's a fundamentally good thing. And bigger companies with bigger teams offer you more of that, where it's like, okay, you can specialize, you can be part of a team that's doing what you're doing, you can learn from somebody. As you progress, you can teach somebody else, and that's also cool. And of course, you get to be part of these big, exciting projects that everybody on the planet has heard of, right? Everybody knows Assassin's Creed.
Yep.
And everybody knows Halo, and everybody knows, like, these enormous projects built by these enormous teams. The indie thing, when the team gets smaller and the project gets smaller, you have a chance to have more impact, right? Like, if you want to start trying to point to the individual person's contribution to a Ubisoft project, because you're looking at it's like, okay, cool, like I did the crates in this level, right? And it's like, okay, that's cool, but that level's enormous. And that's also, it's you're kind of a drop in the bucket at the same time, right? And so the smaller teams and the indie studios, I think they give you a better opportunity to have what seems like a real significant impact on a project.
Yeah, well, you can be everything from doing some VFX, and then all of a sudden you're doing 2D, and you're probably got your hands in a few different roles. And when you're doing VFX, it's like VFX for the whole game versus, yeah, I did the VFX when that one gun explodes, and it's like, that's it. That's all I ever did. It's a pretty small contribution to Assassin's Creed or Halo or whatever.
Yeah, totally. So I think that on one hand you have kind of clarity and specialization and a good opportunity to learn a lot within kind of that specialization that you get from the big teams. On the indie front, you have greater impact. You have a chance to wear many hats. Some people really like that, right? It's like, I can do a lot of different things. We have a guy who's involved with the Beaver project, name pending. We're calling it Damnation right now. I don't know if that'll stick. We'll see.
Right.
But and he's an animator. He's a 3D artist. He's done level work. He rigs characters. Like he can kind of do everything. He's also been in the industry longer than I have. So, I think it's a great place for people that either have a lot of different skills or just want to try a lot of different stuff, and that are okay with maybe the scope being a bit smaller. I think just you compare the average indie game to the average AAA game, you're working with a different budget, a different team size, and I think you have to be okay with that. But I think those are some of the biggest trade-offs.
So you're saying Damnation does not have the same budget as Assassin's Creed?
As a matter of, well, not yet. I mean, we're still fundraising, but no, the ambition is to keep it relatively small and also to maintain as much ownership as we can, right? Like we're not particularly interested in, this is not a company that we want to build and sell or anything like that. The plan is we want to make the games that we want to make. We want to have these characters that people love, leverage those characters in ways that make sense for us, whether that be other media or other games or something else.
Damnation all of a sudden becomes an interactive Netflix TV show or something where it's just, I know a lot of people are starting to get into the idea of like creating games that can create playable episodes and that's starting to become like a conversation lately. And I think that's being spun up because of some of the Netflix partnerships that are starting to leak out.
Well, I think when it comes to games, you really have sort of three ways to kind of stand out. One is you can have a technical innovation, right? You can do something technically that just no one's ever seen. Like I would argue that a big portion of the success of Half-Life 2, if we want to kind of go back a ways, is that they had physics in a game that just nobody had seen, right? They had this Havoc physics engine and suddenly it's like, oh man, you can pick stuff up with this gravity gun and just shoot it. And it does, you can manipulate anything. And that was crazy to people. You can have, and this, I guess, dovetails with tech, but it doesn't have to, which is you just have really fantastically solid gameplay mechanics. You just have really good gameplay. I don't think that there's anything, someone at Activision is going to shoot me. I don't think there's anything particularly interesting about either the tech really or the IP of Call of Duty. But Call of Duty has just amazingly perfect shooter mechanics. Like just like the way the guns work, all of the gunplay mechanics are like, it's the gold standard of the industry, like I would never want to try to make a first person shooter and compete with those guys because they're just way too good at that experience.
Yeah.
And then I think the third thing that you can compete on is and stand out with is your IP. And I would say IP means characters, right? Your characters. Okay. Who are the characters that you have? And I think, to be a really good game, you have to be pretty good at all three, right? Like you have to have a decent experience, obviously. I think you ought to have a good character, and I think that you ought to do some things that surprise people a little bit.
And are you looking at as you're building the Beaver game, as you're building Damnation, are you looking at going, we're going to specialize the character? That at least that's what I'm gathering, is that character is where you want to be first, but we have to make sure the other two components are met.
Yeah,
right? We have to be innovative and.
So we're leveraging a liquids technology, but it's not one that we've developed. I think we'll have to make some modifications to it in order to get it to do what we want. But our liquid tech is not being built in-house by us. We're not going to be like, look at us and our liquid physics, right? That's like what our studio is defined by. It'll be like, no. We have enough liquid physics to make the game work, and we mostly got it from a bunch of Ukrainians, and it's great. But the thing that we want to be known for is these characters, and then I think just kind of this broader kind of idea that people buy into of, I get to kind of revisit what my childhood was like through kind of this lens of this weird character, and I think that's really what we want to sell.
Got it. And you are right now based in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
You're in Germany.
Correct.
Why Germany? How'd you end up there?
Woman, of course.
Of course, every good and or bad decision is because of a woman, right?
No, so actually, originally it was a job, right? I came to Germany after being at Disney. I was at Disney for over 10 years, and I had an opportunity to join Crytek, the creators of Crysis and Far Cry and a number of other big games, their own engine, and I took it. And at the time when I was living in Salt Lake City, this isn't strictly true, but it was mostly true. If you weren't working for Avalanche Software, who was the subsidiary of Disney at the time, if you wanted another job in the industry, there wasn't a lot else going on in Utah, really. And so I knew if I was going to get another job, there was about a 99% chance I was going to have to move. And I thought, well, if I'm going to move, I might as well really move. So I started kind of poking around different parts of the globe and ended up in Frankfurt in Germany, where I worked with Crytek on a little project called Hunt Showdown that I was the lead producer on from 2015 to 2017. And and then in my time there, I ended up meeting somebody, and then I moved back to the States, and then to France, and then to the Netherlands, and then back to Germany, and now I'm here.
What's your favorite place to live then?
Oh, that's like picking a favorite child. Depends on the day, right?
Yeah, well, it does depend on the day.
But it depends on the day, right? Like it changes all the time.
Yeah, I have 5 kids. It changes often.
Look at you. You would have fit in well in Utah, my friend.
Right? A lot of people, they're like, wait, are you Irish and drink a lot? I'm like, no. They're like, oh, you must be Mormon. I'm like, nope. I just like making babies. So,
and the joke, I was a missionary for the Mormon Church in South America for a couple of years, and families there got enormous. Like I met people that had 10, 12 kids, stuff like that. And I'd be like, so how did you end up with 12 kids? They'd be like, well, we don't have a television. So
yeah,
that was the joke.
I don't have Netflix. So,
Yeah. But no, I'm one of 6 kids.
No Netflix, just the chill.
Just the chill. So what do you miss most about Utah?
Oh, like anytime I go back to Utah, which I do often, I'm there every couple of months. I still have 2 kids that live there.
Okay.
And I go back there pretty frequently. And my ritual is like I get off the airplane, I grab the car, and I go to like a cheap, greasy late night Mexican place. Mm-hmm. Right? Like good Mexican food in Europe it's like finding hen's teeth. It's just tough. And good Mexican in Utah, I mean, it's everywhere.
Interesting. I don't think of Mexican when I think of Utah.
Look at a map. We're not that far away. It's probably our biggest. I don't know the demographics now, but I would expect that to be our biggest minority demographic in Salt Lake.
Huh? You like Park City?
Park City's cool. I'm not a huge skier. I know it's weird for like a Utah kid to say. I know how, right? Like if someone was like, "Let's go skiing," I'm like, okay, I can ski. But it never really was my thing. It mostly seemed like a kind of an expensive way to be wet and cold. But
yeah, I'm not a big skier. I did love Park City. I thought Park City was gorgeous.
Park City is. You can have fun in Park City in July. I mean, Park City is beautiful for sure.
Yeah, I've been there in the winter and summer. So, what's the best thing to do in Germany outside of go and drink beer?
Okay,
which is all that Americans think of.
Well, I mean, there is a reason. I mean, the beer's pretty fantastic. Germany is a beautiful country, right? I mean, if ever I miss the mountains of Utah, all I got to do is go a couple hours south and you've got the Alps, right? I mean, I live in northern Germany. It's a lot flatter, but Germany is a very scenic, beautiful place. And I think one of the things that we really don't have anywhere in the U.S., because the U.S. is a really young country. Mm-hmm. Really, especially most of it, right? Like, I mean, there's parts of the U.S. that are, a couple of centuries old. But I just a couple of days ago, I went to a nearby town that was celebrating its 1,150th anniversary of existing as a town.
I'm surprised they keep, at some point you just got to go by the 100. It's like, wow.
Well, I think somebody told me once the biggest difference between Europe and the U.S. is that in the U.S. or in Europe, we think 100 miles is a long distance, and in the U.S., you think 100 years is a long time.
That's actually pretty. I could see that. That's pretty spot on. Because Europe, when I was over there, and you mentioned where you lived, and like going from France to the Netherlands to Germany, like that's really like saying, well, I live in Chicago and I had to get to Columbus, Ohio. Like it's really not that. I mean, you're really just driving through northern Indiana and then you hit, Ohio. Like it's really pretty close. It's like a 15-minute plane or.
Sometimes it's shockingly close. Like I'm in like northeastern Germany, and a flight to Paris is an hour. It's awesome. no big deal. But a couple of things that Germany does really well. So yes, the beer is fantastic, and it's different everywhere, and it's definitely part of the experience. Driving here is great. The Autobahns are everything you think they are. They have traffic and stuff too, but if you're in the right vehicle and just I used to commute between Dusseldorf, where we used to live, and my job in the Netherlands, and I would usually wrap it up to about 125 on the way to work.
Nice.
That was typical.
So you commute. Have to you're forced to drive good, like a Mercedes or a Porsche or something.
I mean, you certainly don't have to. There's plenty of whatever bullshit French cars on the road here too. But yeah, driving can be really, really great.
Okay.
I think like another thing that Germany has all kinds of pros and cons, but like I think that even now, like when you think about German products and things, you tend to think about something that's kind of expensive but really high quality, right? That's just kind of like whatever problem they're trying to solve.
Mercedes, like that's when I think of Germany, I think of that. Or from a beer standpoint, you don't think of Miller Lite.
That's true.
You think of less about mass production, but more about high quality, engineering.
Even the so-called Miller Lite of Germany is still a pretty decent beer, and I think that this is when Germans kind of put their minds to solve a problem, they kind of solve the hell out of it. Like German windows are I've never seen windows like them anywhere else. They've solved the problem of windows. They block sound. They insulate the house extraordinarily well. They're easy to open. They open different directions, so you can like open them and leave them open when it's raining and let the air in, but don't let the rain in. Like they do brilliant things.
Not like the U.S. where they're like, we can make it open this much so that way it breaks these things. They have to buy us again.
They put screens on them. I don't know. I think the U.S. is an amazing country for trying new things, right? I think, the U.S. More than anywhere I've ever been, and because I like to humble brag or whatever, I've been a lot of places, but the U.S. more than anywhere by far, second place isn't close, has kind of this unkillable sense of individualism. Right? People kind of have this sense of I can kind of do shit myself, or I should be able to do shit myself. Right? I think there's a lot of we kind of hold the individual and individual rights as this really sacred thing. And so if you want to try some weird idea, if you want to start a business, if you want to kind of do your thing, the US is easily the best place I know of for any of that. Right. Whereas most of the rest of the world has kind of this greater sense of you're kind of part of a society fabric that really needs to sort of be protected and respected. And you can kind of be an individual sort of, but within some boundaries. And it's a very different dynamic. Right. And this has all kinds of cultural implications. So those are things I think are especially great about the US. Germany, people care about doing things really well. There's a very strong sense of balancing your life between work and other stuff that isn't work. Whereas I think Americans really kind of take a lot of pride in our work ethic, right, and how hard we can work, and that we can I think it's a very common kind of water cooler discussion at work to kind of talk about how little time you took off or how often you eat your lunch at your desk or things like that. And it's kind of this badge of honor, right? Of look at how hard I work and how dedicated I am to my career.
Yeah.
And I'm not making a value judgment either way. I think both of these things have kind of their own nobility to them, but they're very different. It's a very different kind of way of looking at things.
Yeah. And I think, Europe's been known for that, right? The 3-hour midday, siesta. right?
In some parts of Europe, definitely. I mean, lunch. I worked in Paris for a couple of months. Lunch was 2.5 hours and a bottle of wine. Like lunch was an event.
Crazy.
Oh yeah.
That's like, again, for someone who's only lived in America, that's like mind blowing. It's like, but then you drink the bottle of wine. It's like 2.5 hours. Basically means the second half of the day is much more relaxed.
And we're like, why are you going to local taco when you know local taco is going to take 3 hours? Don't go to local taco. That's kind of our attitude right now. Like, why did you do it?
Yeah. No, I think you're, at least, and I obviously I can't speak for the whole country. I've only ever lived in Utah in the U.S. I've never lived anywhere else. I've been all over, but I never lived anywhere and worked anywhere else. But lunch was kind of this like 35, 45 minute chunk of the day, maybe, right? And that's if you weren't kind of crushed and eating at the desk.
I tend to eat at my desk almost every single day because it's like I just got to keep working here while I'm shoveling some food in my mouth. And move on.
Lunch is at my desk today.
Yeah. The Germans definitely don't do the 3-hour lunch thing. It's definitely a lot more contained than that. But they're also like, it's like, I want to get home at a reasonable hour and have dinner with my family, and so yeah, there's definitely kind of this sense of like there is a framework to the way I'm going to get work done today, and when I hit this point, it's over for the day, and that's that. My like vacation time is sacred, and it's and you get a lot of it. In Germany, you have a legally mandated minimum of 20 work days, or what is that, 4 weeks a year. That's like, if you're a barista at Starbucks, you're getting at least 4 weeks a year. And I've never met anyone once that had the minimum, ever. Usually it's 24 or 30, sometimes more. An old buddy of mine who he works at Black Forest Games now. He gets 52. He could just take every Friday off all year, and that would just be the way it is. He's got 52 days off. He could do one a week.
But again, to the culture, and we've tried to adopt some of that stuff here. We have unlimited PTO, and we encourage people, especially certain times of year, take it. Like you got a wedding to go to, take it. Like we don't want people to be in that situation, because I know people who are, my wife being one of them, where they have exactly 4 days and they have to be very careful not to use them, because what if a wedding does come up and we have to travel on that day? And it's like, if you got to go, you got to go. And to your point, if you want to get, I have 5 kids, so I do have to leave oftentimes at 5:15 or 4:30 or whatever it is for a game to get some kids somewhere. Well, then that's part of why I take lunch here, because I don't want to waste an hour and a half having a bottle of wine, because I want to get home to my kid's baseball game or whatever it is. So, and I think that is the right way to live, to make sure that it is the whole person that's trying to be supported, not just, hey, work until you bleed, and then you can figure out if you get any sleep tonight, but I need you to work hard tomorrow. It's like, to me, they bleed together, right? If you are exhausted from work and have a crappy home life, you're not going to be great at work.
I think that's all really accurate. And I think that you certainly see a lot more kind of work-life balance conversation happening now than I think it's a fairly recent phenomenon that this seems to be kind of a priority, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah.
So maybe things are kind of trending towards some kind of average that we're all going to hit. But I think those were some of the big things that I noticed. It's very difficult to reduce either culture down to a 15-minute soundbite or whatever. But
we've just solved all of workforce problems. Right.
There we go. Done.
So considering work-life balance, I know it's super late your time. So let's try to. What can we do, or the people listening, to support Damnation and your new project and stuff like that? Is there any way to connect with you, encourage you, support you, whatever?
Oh, I don't have a Discord server or anything. We're still it's still super, super early days. So geez, it's a fantastic question. I should have a much better prepared answer for. I really don't. I think give us a minute to right now we're just trying to put together the pitch deck and nail down somebody else's money so we can actually kick this thing off. Because right now it's mostly a bunch of guys with good intentions trying to make this happen.
But I'll tell you, from an investor standpoint, the number one thing I look at is it is the characters, not the characters in the game. I've never personally invested on the gaming side of things, but it's the characters behind the company. because I don't think it's that different. What makes a game successful? You said innovation, right? Characters, and so for me, sure, if it's a super innovative product, I'm intrigued, but the characters have to be there. And when I say characters, I'm speaking of you and these other folks that you work with. That's important. You can have a really awesome game idea, and there are a lot of good game ideas out there and other business ideas with really crappy characters behind them, and they fail all the time. So sure. What you've said so far is, hey, well, you're obviously a great character with a great history at some awesome studios and some of the people you've worked with. So that's the exciting part for me, is that it's great characters in game, but also out of game that are leading this. That's, a big part of what will make this successful.
Well, I think there's no question that your team, like in any company, the team's the most important thing, right? Like mm-hmm. I don't, like if I have a good team, we'll for sure come up with a good product. Like I'm not too worried about that. Or we'll come up with whatever tech we need to kind of make things work. I think having the right team is critical. The guys I've got are fantastic. The youngest guy we've got on the team has been in the industry for 12 years. That's the new guy. So just a lot of experience and guys that I've worked with and know really well, and I'm really excited about. So I think, like, the team's not filled out yet. I think there's still a couple of spots we're going to need to fill, but I'm confident that if the only thing I need to succeed, which is not true, but if the only thing I needed was the right team, then we're going to be okay.
That's the most important thing.
For sure, it's the most important. I think about 50% of success is luck. So I guess we'll see there. But yeah, on the front of the team, I've got every confidence that we could do as well as anybody can do.
Well, I'd love for people to connect with you on either LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever, and just watch whatever's happening, because I'm sure you'll release stuff there of like, hey, here's a trailer, or here's a pitch deck, or whatever it is that you want to release. Because it'll be exciting to watch Damnation kind of from early seed to, starting to sprout.
It's very flattering of you to do that. LinkedIn is actually a pretty good place to find me. It's the only social network I participate in. So,
me too.
The others I've kind of unplugged from the rest. And so anybody is, of course, welcome to hunt me down on LinkedIn. I'd like to think I'm not too tough to find. And we'll be announcing stuff on there as it comes up, especially early, because early we're chasing the money, and LinkedIn's not a bad place to be kind of looking for that. So
I would agree. All right, so
LinkedIn's where you'll find us first.
So go follow John Day on LinkedIn. Last question, we ask it to everyone. What's your favorite movie?
My favorite movie is V for Vendetta.
Oh, that's Morganson, right? Who is the main character?
Well, so you have Hugo. Well, Hugo Weaving's the main dude, and okay. Natalie Portman's in it, and it was directed by the Wachowskis. So, okay. and incidentally, like, if you were to ask me like 1, 2, 3, it'd be V for Vendetta first, and then Dead Poet Society, and then the first Matrix film.
Yes. Oh my gosh. We've talked to a lot of people in tech. No one has said it. The first Matrix film
was amazing.
That was a mind-blowing. The most recent one,
the last one was horrible. But anyways,
I said the first one. I said the
last
Matrix
one was, my God, terrible.
Horrible as a stretch. It was not good.
How do you follow up the first one, right?
You
It's like
leave
man,
it
you
alone.
want lightning in a bottle twice? I mean, come on. I mean, I can totally appreciate if they're like, look, we haven't finished telling the story. I get it, but it's just that. The first Matrix film was fantastic, and obviously it's hard to follow up fantastic and have lightning strike twice.
Well, the other three made money, so they did it. But the first one is awesome.
Yeah. But all three of those films, like, they have kind of this running theme of being kind of a pariah and a nonconformist, which I think is something that I relate to. When I was a kid, I was a nerdy kid before it was cool. In fact, it was kind of the opposite. I was like, my dad had a tech company in the 80s, and I was one of the only kids in the neighborhood that had a PC at home. And I was a terrible athlete, which was sort of like the cool thing when I was a kid. So, and I think if you were to look at my like elementary school personal file or whatever, it would say like has problems with authority. That'd probably be like in big bold letters at the top, you know.
Hence becoming an entrepreneur, which is, you know, I think a lot
some of that.
people, you know, they
There's
want, you know, I think that's good though. I think that's great. I've found so many successful people who they struggled with authority or just to listen to every teacher. I'm speaking maybe to Shane right now, but you know, this whole idea of like these people, they have a desire and really where they find a lot of times is an outlet is building a company. And that's something that they can really put a lot of their almost like nervous energy into, and they're very successful at doing it. I love working with people like that.
Well, everything you've said sounds really true. I mean, it has the downside of that is that I then have to manage me, and I don't wish managing me on anybody. I think, including myself. You know, I think I've actually, I've had a lot of really great bosses. I think I've been really fortunate when it comes to bosses in my career. And I pity every one of them looking at it now. You know, I think I was probably just hard.
In our next podcast, we'll have your wife on, and she can talk about managing you.
Oh, you'll get all the dirt. But yeah, I think I've really mostly had good bosses. I think a lot of people, it's a challenge, but I think I got really lucky and learned a lot. And now it's my problem, and I'm kind of realizing now, I think, just how much of a challenge it might have been.
Yeah, you're like, gosh, I wish I could fire me. Oh.
Well, I have those moments.
I'm sure you do. Well, John, your drink is done. It's late in the evening for you in Germany. I totally appreciate you joining us in the evening time. Again, everyone go get connected to John on LinkedIn. And we're going to just keep calling it follow Damnation as it starts to spark and it starts to grow and they start to build it. We wish you the best of luck. We're excited to watch that grow. And if you need any help, reach out to us. We'd be happy to help you fill out your team. So,
thank you so much, very much, you guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. To everyone else, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you, John, so much for hanging out with us tonight.
Sure. Thanks again, you guys. Good luck.
Next day.